This episode is brought to you by Jira. Jira is the only project management tool you need to plan and track work across any team. So if you're a team of developers, Jira better connects you with teams like marketing and design, so you have all the information you need in one place. Plus, their AI helps you knock out the small stuff so you can focus on delivering your best work. Get started on your next big idea today in Jira.
You know when you reach that age where everyone and their mother won't shut up about their credit scores, yet it seems like no one really understands what's so special about those 3 random numbers? That's because credit scores are meaningless, unless you have Credit Karma to show you how to use them. We use those 3 random numbers, plus your financial profile, to help you find your next opportunity. Like a more rewarding credit card, a game plan that helps you pay down debt faster, or a personal loan to help you save more on interest payments each month. Cha-ching! Download Intuit Credit Karma today to get started.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/MBO. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and today we're going to go back in time, back to when the Infinite Rabbit Hole was a good podcast. That's right. We're going to go back to the old format. Let's go ahead and bring in Jacob. Jake, what's going on, dude? How you doing today?
Doing all right. Just I'm downstairs in the basement area right now, and I was just cleaning it up, getting ready for Jeff to be out here in a couple weeks for this whole Elmwood thing. So had some cleaning to do today, and then I took a nap, and then I woke up, and here I am.
Oh, yeah, man. People are listening to this in August, so they've already passed UFO days.
Oh, well, that's the way it goes.
Unless they've listened to this live, which we don't have anybody listening because I announced it 5 minutes before we went live. So I got to stop doing that. We're going to try to make it a thing, by the way, where we record on Sundays at 8 p.m. Central Time. Probably kick off the actual episode around 8:15 after we get all our little bullshit conversations out of the way. So look forward to that. Jeffrey, I see you got yourselves a new background there, my sir. Would you?
Yeah, man.
Would you have anything?
Yeah, man. What? Do I have anything to announce? No, not really. Not yet. Well, I guess it's August. So yeah, the show's back. Probably know it by now. But no, I'm just here living, inspiring people to clean up their basements.
Good. Someone needs to do that. What a dumbass.
Where'd you post the link, bro? I'll post it right now. Oh, I see it. Never mind. We're good.
Yeah, it's on Facebook.
It needed to get done. I've been here for 6 months and I never cleaned it. I'm just messing.
All right. So Hollow Earth today, guys. What do you guys think?
It's true.
It's true? You think so?
Here you go. Show over.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
100%?
Yeah.
Jeffrey, initial thoughts?
Why would it not be?
Initial thoughts on the Hollow Earth, man. First of all, it was one of my favorite conspiracies, like getting into conspiracies back in the day. Hollow Earth, back when YouTube was the Wild West and you could do whatever you really wanted on YouTube. You could find all the good stuff back then, right? So there was all the crazy Hollow Earth videos and the Nibiru Planet X videos and the Anunnaki and all that stuff. So I love Hollow Earth, man. Is it true? Probably like 20% true, 80% disinformation.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I changed my opinion. It's all fake.
Damn.
Just like that, huh? Well, see, so this episode was originally recorded in the solo documentary format. We had made the decision to go ahead and scrap that on this platform. So we are re-recording it now. So Jake, I know, has had a chance to listen to all of this. So we're just going to be getting his reactions for the first time. Jeff, did you listen to the Hollow Earth stuff?
I listened to the first 2,
Yeah.
but by the time this comes out, I'll have listened to all 3 of them.
Oh,
Does that
there's
count?
4 of them, so whatever.
Oh, okay. Well, then 4 of them. No, I listened to 2 of them.
Yeah. Well, spoiler alert, there is 4 Hollow Earth episodes for us to go through. The first one, which will be today, we're going to go over history of the Hollow Earth, some of the basics. Hollow Earth 101, if you would. In Hollow Earth 2, we're going to go over legends, lore, and belief. I believe that's the one where I go over the cult Koresh, which is pretty... we're not going to really dive into the Koreshan cult, if you will, more or less their beliefs on the Hollow Earth, but somewhere down the road, I'm sure we can touch on that a little bit heavier, because there's some very interesting stuff there. And then in Hollow Earth 3, we're going to jump into exploration. Yeah, that's where you're going to hear the Admiral Byrd stuff and some of the stuff that you guys may not have heard. And then we're going to wrap it all up on the 4-year anniversary of the Infinite Rabbit Hole with Hollow Earth 4, Life. We're going to talk about all things life, flora, fauna, and civilizations. So, a lot to look forward to. But for today, History 101. You guys ready to roll?
Yep.
Ready.
Cool. Well, I didn't do the intro first, so I'm going to do it now because I'm half-assed in everything.
Professional, dude. Nail it. You won't.
Super professional.
Good listening experience.
A man by the name of Walter Siegmeister would publish a book under the pseudonym Dr. Raymond Bernard in 1964, simply titled The Hollow Earth. In this book, Bernard highlights a theoretical trip to the inner civilizations in Chapter 8, which describes the best way to get to these superior people. He begins by recommending that whoever makes this journey use a Zeppelin. Once a Zeppelin is acquired, the first stop would be in Tierra del Fuego, in the most southern tip of South America, for fuel. Tierra del Fuego settles on the tip of an archipelago, which extends off of the southern tip of South America, directly across from the Strait of Magellan. From this point, the trip would take you directly south towards the 90 degrees south latitude, aka the South Pole. Once arriving at the southern nadir, the pilot would then have to ignore instruments in the flight station and traverse by sight alone, continuing in the direction that they were heading in to get to the pole. In due time, the scenery would eventually change from a barren, icy wasteland to that of a majestic oasis of incredible and enormous flora and fauna. Bernard notes at this point that the trip has yet to reach the inner Earth, making the claim that this subtropical world would exist around the rim on the other side of the ice wall. As you traverse this beautiful landscape, a new horizon will appear by way of brilliant glowing green auroras from directly in front of your position. The source of the spectacle reveals itself as a small sun as you begin the descent into the lip of the entrance. You're amazed by the display the sun's light plays on the strata of the upper atmosphere, and the sun that you previously knew sets behind you on the edge of the entrance to the inner Earth. The new sun glows a dull red and night never approaches. The climate is warm and tropical, and the glowing source of light in the sky stays stationary throughout the entire time. The paradox that surrounds you is both ancient and new. Ferns and trees that you have only seen in books from paleobotanists and the fauna to go with them are everywhere. As the trip continues, the astounding prehistoric world begins, accented by flying discs in the sky. And as you travel further, the sheer amount of these saucers is incredible. Following a subterranean river, you find a civilization not of ancient, simple beings, but rather gigantic forms of humans with mind-blowing technologies. It becomes clear that the world that you once knew was never what it really seemed. You are in the inner shell of the Hollow Earth. Welcome back to Infinite Rabbit Hole. Yeah, there we go. Theme music, good.
Sick, bro.
Yeah,
That was good. That was good for one take, man.
yeah, you like that?
Yeah,
You're nervous as fuck.
Why are you nervous?
Oh yeah, dude. Oh, I haven't done this in a long time. Having to do that all in one go. I'm like a stuttering fool when I try to record this on my own. It's embarrassing. It's bad.
You crushed it, bro.
Yeah, look at me.
Yeah, good job.
confidence is through the roof now. Now I'm going to fuck this one up really bad. You ready? Ready to roll?
Ready.
What is the Hollow Earth? Hollow Earth is the theory that describes the belief that the Earth contains an enormous cavern just a few hundred miles below the crust, where another world exists with its own ecosystems. This world finds its flora and fauna living on the inside of the concave crust, with a smaller sun floating in what would be considered the dead center of the planet. There are no nights, which causes the world to be cast in an infinite daytime, with weather systems caused by the constant evaporation and precipitation cycles of the rivers, lakes, and oceans within the realm. The very first scientific description of the Hollow Earth was given to us by Sir Edmund Halley, the famed mathematician and astronomer from the 17th and 18th centuries, who was best known for his comet which he discovered in 1682. Adequately named Halley's Comet. His original idea was that the Earth consisted of independently turning concentric spheres, with one inside of the other. More specifically, the structure consisted of 3 more additional north-south independently rotating spheres. This primary evidence for this theoretical structure was the Earth's erratic magnetic poles. This was well before it was known that the Earth had both true poles and magnetic poles, although eventually the physician of Queen Elizabeth in the early 1600s, William Gilbert, had published in his book De Magnemente that it was his belief that the entire planet was a magnet. So they were not too far off from each other. It was Halley's belief that each quote-unquote ring, if you will, would be illuminated by various unknown light sources, possibly bioluminescent plant life, or luminary rocks, and due to the many different forms of plant life that he believed was on each ring, there would be sufficient atmosphere to hold life. Halley believed that this was the case, so heavily that he had presented 3 separate essays to the London Royal Society about his theories of the Hollow Earth. It is believed that a specific book listed in Halley's library stood as the primary source of his belief. A 2-volume encyclopedic book titled Mundus Subterraneus, written by Athanasius Kircher in 1665. Although Halley was the first to outright claim that the Earth was hollow, it was a man by the name of Bartholomew Anglicus from the early to mid-13th century who first came to the idea that the North and South Poles were open holes. In his book De Proprietibus Rerum, translated in English to read on the property of things, Anglicus claimed the poles were large cyclones that pulled cold water into the inner earth from the north, which would pass by great fires in the center and come out of the south as warm as bathwater. So what do you guys think about the very early history of the concept of Hollow Earth?
I think it's interesting. Well, it's not shocking, but it's the Smithsonian, like the whole Smithsonian thing that we always talk about, right? We're always like, where's the bones or where's the this or that? And we're always like, oh, the Smithsonian probably locked it up, right? Mm-hmm. The same kind of thing happens in a lot of like scientific fields as well with the, what is it called? The Royal, I was just literally looking at it. The Royal Society, the London Royal Society. Mm-hmm. Like there's a whole slew of conspiracies on that, right? Like I couldn't spit any off the top of my head, but just knowing like, hey, this guy brings this information to be peer reviewed by these people, and then it's just shot down like, nah, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a thing. So it's interesting. I might have to do like a whole deep dive on that, man. Cause I remember like I've heard a lot of people talking about it, but I've never really taken the time to research it. So
you talking about the London Society, the Royal Society? Yeah. Pretty crazy shit, huh? Yuck up.
But dude wasn't dumb, right? I mean, right? He discovers Halley's Comet. Yeah. You know, obviously he's not stupid, so he's not coming out of his ass. So,
well, maybe he was.
Jacob, I missed that part when I was listening to this before, when you'd recorded it and it was just sitting there in the drive for publishing, that waiting to be published. That another theory was that there was multiple rings, multiple hollow earths. So eventually you'd get to the point where it wasn't just a giants or stuff like people theorize that the hollow earth might have. giants in them, or that's where the Nephilim are, or Nephilim, depending on your pronunciation, whichever one's right, but probably the latter. But eventually you'd get to like the Men in Black thing where he opens up the locker and it's a whole society in there. Tiny little aliens.
So primarily, there's two major concepts to the Hollow Earth, right? There's the one that everyone's familiar with, most recently seen in Hollywood in Godzilla versus King Kong, right? Or Kong.
Right.
Where, you go down these holes, which I'm guessing they're trying to mimic a very small version of a Symes hole with how they showed it, which we'll learn about here in the next section. But basically the gist is that one of the concepts is exactly what you see in that movie, where you go into the hollow of the earth and you're seeing this concave world instead of a convex one. You look to your left, you see the world starting to bend upwards. You look to your right, same thing. You look up and you see the planet or other lands above your head, basically. Then you have the ones that were originally reported or believed, and that was the concentric rings, most famous by Sir Edmund Halley. Now, we'll see this again pop up when we talk about the Cult of Koresh. The Cult of Koresh, spoiler alert, actually believes that we live right now on one of those shells in the inner earth, and that what we're looking at above us could potentially be lights from other cities when you look at stars. We'll dive into our thoughts and feelings about that later on. But yeah, for the most part, to wrap that whole first section up in a nutshell, basically just introducing you to the very first concept of the inner earth. The first concept of the hollow earth didn't have a sun. Like we had just read, it was the concentric circles. I'm not going to get too far ahead because we do end up covering this, but even the hollow earth version that we know of today, or that we believe of today, didn't have a sun in it when first conceptualized. So, yeah. You guys ready to move on?
Mm-hmm.
You guys ready to learn about Symes and his holes?
Oh, tell me about Symes and his holes.
Yeah, he's got two of them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. One on top, one on the bottom.
Yeah, like most people.
Yeah. Symes holes. On April 10th of 1818 in St. Louis, Missouri, a man by the name of John Cleves Symes passed out a personally written circular to all that would accept it. It read, "To all the world, I declare the earth is hollow and habitable within, containing a number of solid concentric spheres, one within the other, and that it is open at the poles, 12 or 16 degrees. I pledge my life in support of this truth, and am ready to explore the hollow. If the world will support and aid me in this undertaking, J.N.O. Cleves Symes of Ohio, late captain of infantry." Symes spent a considerable amount of time in the army before settling down in St. Louis as a fur trader between the colonized East and the natives of the West. It was 2 years after moving to St. Louis at the age of 38 that Symes would write his circular in hopes of someone funding his expedition to the northern opening of the earth. Although he was not well known for his scientific research, Symes did become obsessed with the idea of the hollow earth, enough so that there were eventually 2 books written about his obsession, one by a friend of his by the name of James McBride, who would write Symes's Theory of Concentric Spheres in 1826, and the other being written by his son, Americus Symes, by the title of the Symes Theory of Concentric Spheres, which was literally the same title with the word "the" at the beginning and the removal of the apostrophe S after the name Symes. Americus's book was written in 1878, almost 50 years after Cleves' death. The scientist and the villain of the Salem witch trials, Cotton Mather's, would eventually author a book called The Christian Philosopher that discussed the theories of the inner earth at length, including about 3 pages on Halley's theory of concentric spheres originally published in 1692. With this being one of the more popular books used in scientific study at the time, it is not hard to believe that Symes could have been in possession of a copy and gained his obsession from this piece of work. But the problem with Mathers's book being where Symes received his obsession has one flaw. Mathers's book never mentions large holes at the poles. Now, it is true that an earlier piece claimed cyclones at the poles, which pulled water in from the north and pushed water out of the south. But the idea of the massive holes at the poles was not mentioned prior to Symes's circular. According to author David Standish in his book, Hollow Earth, published in December of 2005, by conducting a simple internet search, it is concluded by the masses that a man by the name of Leonard Euler would first mention the gigantic holes. But the first ever literary mention of Mr. Euler's belief in Hollow Earth was made in the first book previously mentioned about Symes, Symes's Theory of Concentric Spheres in 1826 by James McBride. Now, side note, Euler is, however, credited with polishing the original build of calculus, originally founded by Leibniz and Newton. In McBride's book, Euler was mentioned as the one who would eventually add to Halley's theory by adding the idea of an object similar to the sun at the center as the singular sphere under the crust of the Earth. He also added that this inner sun would provide light for a very advanced race of beings. While we are on the topic of internal suns, Scottish physicist and mathematician Sir John Leslie famously claimed that there was not just one sun in the hollow earth, but there were actually two. He even went as far as to name these two inner suns, Pluto and Proserpine. It is true that Symes's holes were the most prominent contribution that Symes had for the hollow earth theory. This would be a concept that would stay with Hollow Earth all the way up to and beyond current times. But the man did not stop there. Symes had the entire theory of Hollow Earth planned out, but never recorded them in any official book or journal, hence the two books that were later published on his ideas. His theory would be partially published in a series of articles written for various entities, but was never completed on paper. One way that he expanded on Halley's theory was that he added a specific number of independent inner spheres. According to him, there were 5, and 5 levels of other lands inside of the Earth. He claimed that each ring had its own atmosphere, and the poles were wide open, just like they are on the shell of the planet. Symes also claimed that the Earth functioned as a centrifuge, and sent all of the heavy material to the skin of the planet, while leaving the middle completely hollow. This would also lend a good reason as to why the poles are cold and the equator is hot, with more force being at the waistline of the planet while it is spinning. The raw material at the equator would be thinner due to the drifting of the said material towards the southern and northern poles away from the equator due to centrifugal force. This would cause a thicker buildup of material by the poles. The idea would be that the thinner the crust, the more heat that is allowed from the inner star, and the thicker the crust at the poles would allow far less heat to escape. With the total surface of the Earth measuring 197 million square miles and an estimated weight of about 6 sextillion tons, it is believed that if the Earth was a solid sphere, it would weigh incredibly more. But with holes of 1,400 miles in diameter at each pole with a progression of 1,200 miles thick at the poles and 800 miles thick at the equator, the math makes better sense with the Earth only weighing 6 sextillion tons. This model would move the center of gravity from the center of the planet outwards towards the crust, which due to sheer condensed mass of everything from natural metals, dirt, water, and molten rock, a gravitational force would be holding down those on both the inside and outside of the skin of the planet. Symes was also the first to mention other evidence for the case of the gigantic holes in the Earth, in which we will go over in length later on in this presentation. But to touch on it quickly, a few of his questions which surrounded the concept of the hollow Earth were: why do many animals in the Arctic migrate north before the bitter cold of winter and return in the spring, looking like they never missed a meal? And why are there tropical trees, vegetables, and flowers that are found on the shores of Iceland, Norway, and Siberia? Symes also pulled a crafty move when it became clear to him that he may never be able to go on the expedition that he wanted so badly. According to author David Standish in his book Hollow Earth, Symes authored a book titled Simsonia, Voyage of Discovery, under the pseudonym Captain Adam Seaborn, about a utopian civilization from the Hollow Earth that was founded by an expedition by sea. The thought was to create an interest by the public and spark someone to help fund his expedition. Now, side note, another name who has been tied to this piece of work was a man by the name of Nathaniel Ames, who was famous in the early 1800s for writing nautical fiction. But due to the sheer number of times the book referenced the quote-unquote genius of Symes, it is hotly debated that he was, in fact, the true author. Although Symes ultimately never got to see his dream come to fruition, a pupil of his by the name of Jeremiah Reynolds would eventually be awarded support for an Antarctic trip in Baltimore, Maryland in 1826 after giving a lecture on the subject. The next step was to convince Congress to allow a military ship to be spared for the expedition. And it was on May 21st, 1828, when President John Quincy Adams awarded Reynolds the expedition and named him an agent of the Department of the Navy. But unfortunately, the expedition never came to fruition, as Andrew Jackson was voted in as the new president in 1829 before the sloop of war, or gunship, USS Peacock, was able to be rebuilt for Reynolds' query. But in October of 1829, Reynolds had finally departed on a ship completely paid for by a wealthy New Yorker by the name of Dr. Watson. Dr. Watson paid for the ship and 2 tenders in exchange for him to go along with the expedition. The 3 ships were officially named the Anawan, the Seraph, and the Penguin. Although the expedition fell short of its goal, there were a few positives gained by the trip. One member of the expedition, a James Yates of Albany, New York, was an artist and scientist who discovered the first ever fossil on the Antarctic continent, which turned out to be a 10-legged sea spider, the first ever discovered of such a species. Symes' influence did not end at Reynolds. One other extremely popular writer would find influence from Symes' whole. A short story by the title Miss Found in a Bottle won a prize of $50 in the Baltimore Sunday Visitors newspaper's 1833 literary contest. The author was none other than Edgar Allan Poe, who would use the concept of Symes' holes for a major part of the story, in which the protagonist's ship is caught in a whirlpool at sea that sends he and his crew to the underworld. Poe would go on to mention Symes and Reynolds by name in many articles that he had written as a contributor to the Southern Literary Messenger and a few other publications. So I know that was a pretty long section there, guys, but what do you guys think about Mr. Symes and his holes?
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/MBO. Terms and conditions apply.
Starbucks Iced Apple Crisp Oat Milk Shaken Espresso. Made with blonde espresso, creamy oat milk, and spiced apple flavors. It's an icy crisp sip you can enjoy all autumn long. Order ahead on the Starbucks app.
I want to know, do we know, is there any experiments that can be done or have been done of rotating spherical objects in whatever spaces to see how they form over time?
So if you're talking about in a vacuum, I don't know. But at my job, we do have centrifuges. And I can tell you, I'm not going to go into the specifics of my job, but the science, the quote-unquote hypothetical science that was included with Symes' theories makes some sense. It really does. Centrifuges do work in a way where they force all of the matter outwards. And although I can't say how that would work with a perfect sphere because my centrifuges at work are not perfect spheres.
Well, neither is the Earth.
No, you're right. It's not. And we actually do
Right.
talk about that at some point as well. You would think that by rotating fast, like as a centrifuge, that all the mass of the inside of the planet would be forced towards, one side, creating a cavity on the inside. Now, how big is the cavity is another question. That depends on how dense the Earth is. And the fact that matter would move away from the equator, let's say the equator, the Earth spins and the equator is perfectly parallel, which we know it's not, right? It's not perfectly level, but let's just say that it is, right? Just for this particular explanation. If you were to spin that like a centrifuge, the mass would go out, and then when it hits that apex where the equator is, the only place for it to go would be out from that position. It would not sit right there. Force facing it out this way would eventually catch that lip, and it would be forced up and down. So the science is not bad.
Because my thought is, right, I'm the conspiracy guy, so I'm always the first one to be like, back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, they fucking co-opted all of the academics and everything like that and started teaching us what we all think we know now. And like, that's just what the truth is, right? About everything.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, my thought is, because like, I don't know if you guys have seen this. I think we talked about it on this show before. On Saturn, on the poles of Saturn are these hexagons, right?
Yes.
In NASA photographs. And right, there's like a million theories. I have my own theories on what that is, but if these giant bodies in space are creating these hollow, or like they are hollow, and they're not what we think they are, right, from our school days, where it's like the crust and the mantle and then the outer core and the inner core, and we just think it's like this solid object, right? If it's not, and like I'm wondering if that pole on Saturn, that hexagon, has something to do. Like, is there like winds coming out of the hollow Saturn that are reaching the surface, creating this weird shape? You know what I mean? Like, this is kind of where my mind's going on this.
This is something that I thought about too. I can't remember if we do touch on it in this, but in my research, they did talk about the other planets as well, and how the theory would also apply to the other planets as well. So the idea that Mars has poles that we can't see, right? Or they have this this geometric shape to them, potentially leading, or potentially being, or not, I wouldn't say being, but the shape alone, when you look at it, you can imagine that there would be some concavity.
Yes.
Yeah, like that, right?
Be concave. Yes.
Because I did look at that, and that Jeff, the conversation that we had a long time ago about that actually came to mind, and I did have to look at that, and I was like, this could be concave. This could be something that is caving in on itself and potentially creating a Sims hole. And then, of course, we know that NASA doctors images quite a bit. So it would not be impossible for
correction.
that.
NASA creates images out of data strips. They don't doctor anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm pretty sure they take an airbrush to some shit too.
Oh, I'm sure they do doctor stuff. Let me. Yeah, okay. But
so yeah,
because I can go deep right now. Like I could go deep as.
Go ahead.
Well, like just to go back to the Saturn thing, right? Like, if anybody's listened to the Shadow Man podcast, the first episode, I went deep on this whole thing about how like the elites that run the world, they're all in this cult and they worship whatever deity they worship, doesn't matter, but they're really like worshiping or remembering a time back in the golden age, as they call it, right? And in this golden age, we've talked about it before, right? The Earth was shadowed in like a fog, right? Like a purple haze, and everything was abundant and like all these things, right? It was this golden age way prehistory. And then they're like worshiping this time because it was like the ultimate time for humanity. And then whatever happened in space, electric universe theory shit, right? Earth gets sent this way, Saturn sent, all this shit happens in space. And after X amount of time, the haze clears, and then like here we are on this planet. But they still worship Saturn for whatever reason, right? There's multiple theories on why they worship Saturn. They do worship Saturn, I can promise you that, right? Mm-hmm. So is it, to me, I'm thinking like, is Saturn still living in its golden age? Is that why Saturn is what we're told is a gassy planet? We can't see the surface because it's just covered in this foggy hue, right? This gaseous hue. And is the hollow Earth, the advanced beings living inside of hollow Saturn, still producing whatever it is that's creating that golden age for these beings? And that's why they're worshiping Saturn, because they know the ancestors are still there. They're still living on this planet. They're still terraforming Saturn.
I just want to say,
whoa,
that Futurama basically said the same thing.
I never watched Futurama. They stole it from me, though.
They stole it from you.
It's from the makers of The Simpsons, man.
I've seen like an episode here and there, but I've never watched it.
Same, but slightly different. You know, it's like The Simpsons in the future. It's actually a great show.
Kind of a rant there, but somebody listening will be like, "Holy shit, Jeff, you're right, bro."
Well, the Martians in that show are I can't remember if they're like from the hollows of Mars or if they're just from large caverns, but pretty similar. Yo, Cobb, what do you think, buddy?
Kind of bummed that.
Why?
Well, it's not like I'd believe it anyway, because I mean, even if Symes was able to go through with his expedition, we have Admiral Bird's expedition. I don't believe that one for a second, but but it's like, oh yeah, we get all this ability to do this, and then it falls apart, and then it falls apart again. Although finding the fossil is pretty cool, but
yeah,
it kind of makes me like, I know there's certain spots in the North Pole, I believe, or the South Pole. I can't remember, the Arctic or Antarctic, but where we have scientific research going on, and they're taking ice samples and stuff and looking at them under a microscope and carbon dating the ice samples and doing all that sort of mumbo jumbo. But it makes me wonder, like, you know, there's an awful lot of people out there that believe in the flat earth or the hollow earth or various things about the earth. And with the insane amount of ability to do things like crowdfunding these days, where you don't have to hit up Congress and ask for permission to go do these things. You could literally just get, you know, a sizable portion of people that believe in this sort of stuff, and they could $10-$20 it into, you know, a good expedition to go and investigate this stuff. And it just kind of shocks me that with the amount of, like, remember when we did our flat earth episode, it was so small and we kind of just teeter-tottered over dipped our toes in it and kind of went over the surface of it and just kind of did our basic, like, this is what we kind of think about it sort of stuff. And we got so much flack and hate from it, from people that are flat earthers that just couldn't believe for a second that, you know, we could have anything better to do than obsess over flat earth. And it's like, all right, well then crowdfund an expedition and go prove us wrong. You know, it's like, oh, you're not going to? Okay, well, I guess we're going to keep sitting right here. So
I think there's a lot of red tape.
Sure.
There's too much red tape for that.
You think so?
Yeah, I think there's too much red tape. I think in a lot of places, it's like government regulations. Like you just can't show up in a lot of places. A lot of it's protected, right? So you got to get permits. And then if you do get permits, you're going to have guides, or you're going to be told where you can go and all this and that, right? And for the places that aren't like that, there's still a lot of red tape, because we could go all the way back, right? Like I was saying, let's get conspiratorial, go back 100 and something years, right? If they fudged science, this is what like Terrence Howard was talking about on Joe Rogan's podcast, right? And everybody's talking shit, making fun of Terrence Howard and all this stuff, right? What he's talking about basically, essentially, is he's just saying, if they fudged the science or the math at some point in the past, and it's something foundational that we all rely on, then we're all just fucking running in circles right now. And that could go into something as simple as like navigational tools, right? Like there might be something back in the day when they were engineering and coming up with things that we would use to navigate to the true poles. And they might have been like, let's fudge something here so that nobody can actually get there using this tool. So there's a lot of things like you could say that, hey, you're just not going to show up. I don't care how much money you got and how much funding you have. You're not just going to get to one of these holes and see what's in there.
They can't stop all of us.
That's true. The flat earthers say that all the time. They're like, they can't stop us all, bro. Let's go.
Yeah, but not all of them are going to go.
No, but people have gone, and I've actually followed people who've done live streams on sailboats trying to sail their ass down to Antarctica, and it's like none of them ever make it there, you know?
I was watching a video of somebody trying to sail down to Antarctica, and, they apparently, some of the absolute worst waters in the world is right off the coast of Antarctica. Like there's these 3 different levels of fierce ocean right off the coast, right? And it just gets worse as you get closer. I was watching this live stream or a video, I can't remember, it was so long ago, of somebody going down there. It was just glass all the way through, just perfect, nothing, not even a ripple in the water. Now, if they were actually, heading down to Antarctica, I have no idea. But it is a funny concept,
Well, you also have to, oh, sorry, I meant to cut you off.
No, I was just going to dive into stuff that we're going to end up talking about here in a little bit, like the Antarctic Treaty and, Nazi Germany and all that stuff and all the weird shit that happens down there. There's a lot of weird shit that happens. We need to do an episode on Antarctica, this episode on Hollow Earth, like just touches the tip. Just the tip, Jake, of Antarctica. And, the amount of really weird shit. You know what's even funnier about that? Just to kind of take a sidestep, Jeff, I'm sorry, I'll get back to you in here in a minute. This whole Hollow Earth episode came from somebody, I believe. No, I'm not going to screw it up. When I made a post on Facebook a while back asking for recommendations of topics, someone posted that they wanted us to focus on Antarctica. So I went out and bought a couple books on some of the weird shit in Antarctica, and one of the very first sections in one of the books was Hollow Earth, and I just went down the Hollow Earth rabbit hole and ended up doing an entire series on Hollow Earth. That's how I got here. So eventually, whoever that was, we will be doing Antarctica. I promise you.
We're going to talk about the was it seismic ray that they have in Antarctica that caused like a massive earthquake in Europe and killed tons of people.
The neutrino detector.
Oh, that thing. You know what I'm talking about.
Don't they have just a laser that just points out into space as like a signal or something?
Yeah, it's the neutrino detector. It's the same thing. It's the same. I was going to say device, but I guess it's more of like an array than a device. But I mean, look, this kind of ties in what I was going to say a minute ago. What you were saying with the weather and what you're saying with this neutrino detector and like these devices and stuff. Like, there's a lot of ways, man, that they can keep people from getting there. Right? Let's add another layer of red tape. Bro. They have weather manipulation and geoengineering technologies. So for all we know, dude, like I'm sure, like let's say it is what they say. I'm sure Antarctica's weather sucks, right? But it could be made worse, or those layers of ocean heading to a couple hundred miles heading in there could also be targeted with weather modification to make sure you don't just fucking sail your ass over there on accident.
It'd be like the Truman Show where he's trying to get to the outside of the studio and they're kicking up the waves and all that stuff, trying to capsize his boat.
Exactly, dude. And what happens when he gets to the wall? Everything's calm, just like Jeremy was saying. When he got there, everything was calm. And that movie says a lot, man. That's one of my favorite movies of all time, because if you really watch that movie and you look at all the small details, like the I don't know, the producers, the directors, the writers, whoever it was, somebody knew some shit. Even when the light, Truman walks out of his house, right? And one of the lights in the dome falls and hits the street. And he walks over there and he's like, what the fuck? And he looks at it, and the light is called Sirius B, like the star.
Yeah.
So it's like little shit,
So I had to look up your neutrino detector. I've totally seen this fucking thing before. I don't think it has anything to do with lasers, man. If I'm remembering correctly, neutrino detectors detect neutrinos, believe it or not, which are particles that can pass through solid objects. And there's, because I don't know, it's because they're so small or the way that their composition is. And neutrino detectors are these giant cavernous rooms, and it's just basically static air, and it's filled with sensors, nothing but sensors,
Right.
from the ceiling to the floor to the walls. Everything is sensors, and it's in a completely hollowed large room, and
Right.
it's made so that when the tiniest of particles, aka neutrinos, pass through, they can detect it because there's no outside interference whatsoever. They I want to say one of these is supposedly in Mount Cheyenne, right?
But the thing you got to remember, Jeremy, what you're describing is the thing that they told us publicly that they're building with that money.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah,
Right.
I'm
the
sure.
laser part of it came from that whistleblower that was on the Sean Ryan's podcast when he came out and said that
That's it. I was trying to think about it.
He was
who was it?
head. He was the head. I forget his name. But he was like the head maintenance / fire chief in the base, one of the Antarctica sub bases or whatever. And he had access to everywhere. And he was the one saying that this neutrino detector that we all know exists. Well, not everybody, but we know exists.
Yeah.
Isn't just a neutrino detector. It also transmits.
Bro,
that's what he was saying.
And it causes earthquakes and stuff.
It's a directed energy weapon.
Yeah.
Is that guy still alive?
He is.
Bro, I mean,
I was trying to figure out. I was just thinking about it, Jeff, trying to figure out. I was like, what was it? It was on either Sean Ryan show or JRE. It was a Congress, one of the Congress whistleblowers talking about all this UFO, UAP sort of stuff. And I was like, gosh, I know for a fact he was talking about that and saying that it's not just what they're saying that it is.
Yeah. And what Jeremy was about to say, like, is he still alive? Like, look, there's ways that some of these whistleblowers can get some of this info. I think that now there's channels for these guys to go through to let this information out and not be at like an immediate risk of being offed.
Right. They're not committing espionage or whatever.
Right. If they go through proper channels, right? And like, believe it or not, I am the conspiracy guy. I'm going to hot take here. I think like people like Dr. Stephen Greer, like he has a system in place. And I think that that's whatever system he's doing to help these people do this type of thing, like whistleblow without getting murdered. Mm-hmm. That's the type of system that works. And there's more than just him doing it. A lot of people think that he's fake. I actually think that he's not. But
I was going to say, there are people in this world that will burn you at the stake for saying anything nice about Greer.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm 100% get that. And there was a long time.
You guys hear a missile?
I thought he was full of shit too. I thought he was a psyop for a long time too. But then I started realizing and started really paying attention to what he's talking about. What he's actually talking about is the technology, right? Free energy technology. You don't talk about free energy. That's like a big no-no. You could talk about UFOs and aliens and all the shit, but once you talk about free energy technology, you get murdered. And the fact that he's talking about it on huge platforms tells me like maybe he does have a protocol for not getting killed.
See, that's what that guy from Buffalo that created the water engine should have done, was go on some big ass podcast and announce it instead of just bringing it to his local newspaper.
Yeah, well, a lot of these guys, they try to patent technology. They'll discover whatever, and they'll try to patent it to make money, and that's when shit happens. It's when dudes open source things and they just drop it on the internet for 10 million people to see publicly. That those are the guys who are usually like not murdered.
Yeah,
because it's obvious at that point. It's like, what do you
yeah,
you're a martyr.
If he gets Clinton tomorrow, we know that this is some off shit. You guys ready to move on?
Yeah.
Cool. We're halfway through.
Nice.
I miss these types of episodes. More of the basics. The first time that the idea was brought forward of a hollow earth in modern literature was by William Reed in his book Phantom of the Poles, published in 1906. With claims from Arctic and Antarctic explorers, Reed published this book and introduced the modern world to a real argument for hollow earth. In his book, he also claimed that the crust was about 800 miles thick and that the entire diameter of the inside of the planet was 6,400 miles wide. Quote, "The earth is hollow, The poles so long sought are phantoms. There are openings at the northern and southern extremities. In the interior are vast continents, oceans, mountains, and rivers. Vegetable and animal life are evident in this new world, and it is probably peopled by races unknown to dwellers on the Earth's surface. The March 1962 issue of Flying Saucers magazine reiterates this statement with their own challenge to the phantom physical location of the poles. Quote, "One of the things that we have been the most consistent about is that no one has yet been to the North Pole, all claims to having done so being false, because the pole is not a point and cannot be reached in the acceptable sense of the word." The magazine goes on to prove this by referring to Russian archives that claim that the magnetic North Pole is not a singular point, but rather a line of stronger magnetic energy at a length of about 1,000 miles. To be fair, most of the books on the subject of the hollow earth are pretty old by the standards of research, and many of these books make a claim that aircraft do not fly directly over either pole. Although this is correct for the Antarctic South Pole, we now have technology that shows it is different for the North Pole. According to cryopolitics.com's image that depicts the flight paths of polar region flights, a trip from Seattle to Dubai will take you the closest to true polar north. Although this visual aid shows that the flight does not go directly over the true North Pole, it is seen that the proximity to the pole is close enough to witness the point from the view of the aircraft making the flight. Many aircraft, such as the Navy's P-3 Orion and possibly the new P-8 Poseidon, have a switch that dictates whether or not the aircraft is using true north or magnetic north as its basis for navigation. The switch is commonly referred to as the mag-true switch and is used in specific instances when either conducting operations or training in the polar region where a heading of true north would be more beneficial over the standard magnetic north setting used on the majority of other flights. Another thing to understand is that gravity is stronger at the poles of the Earth. This is due to the Earth's oblateness. Oblateness is the term used to describe the flattening that is seen at the poles of the Earth. Why is this so? Modern science will tell you that because of the oblateness, the poles are closer to the Earth's center, which causes a higher gravitational force. But in the hollow Earth model, the increase of gravitational force would be due to the earlier mentioned centrifuging of our planet, which causes a good amount of extra matter to travel away from the equator, and by using science's solution to gravity, more mass equals more gravity. We see that the modern science model holds true in the hollow Earth theory as well. This is also how the hollow Earth theory explains the difference between magnetic poles and true poles. Magnetic poles being the rim of the opening to the center of the planet, and in the hollow Earth model, the true poles do not actually exist. If they did, they would be floating in the space at the exact center of the gaping holes at the top and bottom of the Earth. Therefore, any pictures or claims that someone has visited either pole would be incorrect. There have been many instruments that have been used to determine that an explorer has made it to their polar destination. Most rely on gravity. With that being the case, the reports of compasses going haywire at the poles make sense, since the abundance of gravitational force would have the compass reading sporadically. And when reaching gravitational magnetic north, compasses are known to show a phenomenon that depicts a proper magnetic heading, not when you lay the compass horizontally, but rather when you hold it vertically. This is explained by the hollow Earth theory by the claim that the true magnetic power comes from the bulk of raw material at the lip of the entrances instead of a single point of magnetic power. This would also lend to the Russian model that the magnetic pole is a line hundreds of miles long, which, if you think about it, a hole at the top or the bottom of the planet depicted on a rectangular flat map of the Earth would be seen as a line. Thoughts, gentlemen?
I heard a lot of the word gravity, man, and I think that's what that's where I'm kind of stuck right now. And this goes back to what I was saying in the last part. You know, all I got to do is fudge around with one piece of science, and they can trick us all into thinking some shit forever, or for at least 100, 200 years. And I think gravity is probably that thing, right? Like I'm more in line with electric universe, like plasma cosmology shit, where it's like gravity is not the force. Gravity is the effect of the electric force, right?
Yeah.
And that we're all electric beings and we're being held here statically, not gravitically, right? So,
I mean, Jeff's onto something. Isaac Newton discovered gravity in 1687. Before that, everyone could fly.
So conspiracy theories are once again correct.
Jeff's like, don't you mock me, boy.
Good stuff. Yeah, Jeff.
Well, plus with I've seen some people that they're probably in like Alaska, honestly, or Greenland, but doing walks across these massive glaciers and stuff. And there'll be spots where it looks solid. It looks just like a sheet of ice. Who knows how thick it is, but it just looks like a sheet of ice. And it's mapped out to where people know not to walk across these areas because it's actually, a foot thick, and then there's a void or a chasm that's like 300 feet deep. You'll go down the bottom, you'll die when you hit the bottom. Because of the way the ice forms, it can kind of grow, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Make pockets. Sometimes you'll get a pocket in an ice cube, or something. But someone's going to be like, this guy's an idiot. And they're true. They're right. But even if there was a hole in the North Pole,
they're true.
If it was 800 miles thick, right, then that would mean that the heat from the center or from the inner sun probably wouldn't affect the top layer, and that's why we get, all that ice and all that ice buildup. So it could just be covered up. So even if you got there to the North or South poles, you get to the true North and just be like, well, there's nothing here. Well, that's because it's, 20 feet of ice, and then you get to the chasm that leads to the inner Earth.
Or it could be covered up because of geoengineering.
That too.
That's a lot of geoengineering.
They've been doing it for a long time, man. They do it every single day.
I guess.
Or it could be covered by scaffolding.
Or maybe scaffolding.
Maybe scaffolding.
Yeah. I know what your catch is on the word gravity. I personally, I know this is a lot of people's argument, is that gravity doesn't actually exist, and science doesn't even claim to have gravity completely figured out, which is true. Gravity is still a theory, but it's a pretty strong theory, from scientific and physics point of view.
Right. Well, let me stop you real quick because I know what you're about to say.
That makes a lot of shit work. But okay, go ahead.
Right. I know what you're getting at, and I know what you're about to say. But this is something that happens often with conspiracies, right? Is that somebody says something and then it's interpreted in I guess the wrong way is the right way to say it. So when I say gravity, I'm not saying gravity doesn't exist. What I'm saying is that gravity is not the force. Okay, gravity is
an effect in the electric universe.
Right. It's an effect. It still happens. Like we're still like the gravitational pull is still a thing, but it is not like the force that I don't know how to explain this, right? Like it's not like this force in the universe that everything is happening because of gravity. No. Gravity is also an effect because of other forces, if that makes sense. So this is the same thing that happens when people talk about flat Earth, right? And again, I'm not a flat earther, but when anybody says flat Earth, the first thing in people's minds is, why is the Earth flat, but all the other planets are round in space? And it's like, no, you totally missed the point. Space isn't real. There's no other planets. You know what I'm saying? Like, so
yeah.
I don't want to talk past each other is my only point about the gravity thing. So
listen, smooth brain. If you believe that space is real, if we can divert into the electric universe for a second, right? And we will be covering this at some point. I have a book for it. It's over there, right? I'm open to all theories, 100%. But let me ask you a question, because I don't know much about the electric universe. Does the electric universe only apply to biological bodies?
No, the electric universe. Well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
So you said that we are electricity, or we are of an essence of electricity. Am I using that correctly?
No. We're charged.
Okay.
We have a charge.
Okay.
And so does
Well,
the
everyone
Earth.
knows that.
So
Right.
Everyone
Everyone
on ESD knows that.
a charge as an electric charge or a magnetic
correct.
charge?
Yeah. Right.
Is it a magnetic charge? I mean, now
Well, magnetism. That's interesting that you asked. Magnetism is similar to gravity in that I might be messing this up because I'm not a fucking electric universe scientist. I'm just a fan of the theory, right? But magnetism and gravity are both effects of this electric plasmitic phenomena that is causing these other forces, right? Like magnetism and gravity. Every molecule has a charge, right? Like this is just basic.
Yeah. No, that's
right.
Yeah.
So just going off of that, we are charged. Everything is charged. The air molecules around you are charged. The Earth has a certain charge to it. And all of these things
walk across carpet, you build it up like a capacitor and then you discharge it on metal. Yeah.
Right. And all of these things on the Earth, including the Earth itself, every molecule has developed this charge in a specific region of a greater charge. Let's call it the ether. So therefore we're like electromagnetically connected to this place. Call it gravity if you want. That's fine. You know, it's a semantic game almost, but it's just not like gravity's holding us here.
Well, so I spent 8 years as a naval aviation electrician. So I am by far the most qualified person here because I am an expert in all things electricity and know everything. That's a joke, by the way. Just
let's go. Let's hear the argument from authority. Let's hear it.
And we all know that helicopters or aircraft in general create static reservoirs, if you will, or a static charge of electricity when they're in flight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, aircraft aren't biological, right? So
no, but the molecules that make up that aircraft, would you call atoms biological? Would you call like electrons or protons biological? At what point do
they're biological building blocks, though? I mean,
or like what is the smaller ones now? Like qubits?
No.
Would you call quarks? Would you call quarks biological?
No, that's
at what point? At what point does how many quarks coming together creating enough molecules that make enough elements that make enough things? At what point do quarks become biological? Right? Is a fractal universe. This is why I'm having trouble with the holographic universe, because that's what this is. It's a fractal universe. The further you go down,
spoiler alert, everybody.
You go down quarks, right? And if we had the ability to see further and deeper, lower levels down into quarks, we would probably see more and more things, right? And it's the same when you look out into the macro. It's the same idea, right? And physicists for the last 40 years have been talking about string theory and like these multiverses. It's the same thing, going out and going in. It's fractal. So it's super hard to like convey this idea, but at what point is a quark biological, right? So the electric universe theory, yes, it applies to everything, biological or not. We're all charged. Everything is charged in this universe.
So the original part, because we gotta reel this back in. So the original conversation was built off of gravity, right? And the concept of gravity. So my original argument was going to be that in a vacuum, two forces of matter or bundles of matter or blocks of matter, fucking rocks, right? Out in the vacuum of space collide, right? And that creates a spin. And that spin, if it's a large enough of a body, will act as a gravitational force, attracting more and more matter, right? And this is how we get planets, and this is how we get stars, and everything that we know about in the universe, right? Fuck, I don't even remember anymore. Jeez, we went so far off that path. Damn it. Anyways, gravity. That's all I have to say.
My only point
gravity.
I only brought that up initially was just saying, to bring it back before, like, look, they just have to fudge one thing to fuck us all up for a while, right? And gravity could be that thing. And I'm not saying it is that thing, but all these instruments and utilizing gravity or using these instruments that tell us magnetic north or true north, right? Like any one of these instruments could be fucking tampered with and like you're not getting there.
So do you believe that electricity can be a gravitational force to other electricity?
To electricity?
Yeah. And then my next question would be, do you believe that light is a form of electricity?
Is light a form of electricity or is electricity a form of light? I would say probably the latter.
Well, because in the realm of science, right, you have matter and energy, right? So when we were talking about the double slit experiment back in the simulation theory episode, we found out that physicists have proven through the double slit experiment and other experiments now, but the first one was double slit, right? That light acts as both energy and matter. Correct? It can
it's a particle. It's all potentials.
Correct.
Technically, it's all potentials. Yeah,
and it literally depends on whether or not it's being observed, which is an absolutely incredible phenomenon.
That's the mind fuck, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So electricity would be on the energy side of the spectrum, right? Electricity is not matter. Do we agree with that?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't agree. I don't think I can agree with that because I don't think I know enough to say so, because I'm pretty sure like plasma would probably be considered like in between and both, right?
I don't know, man. Maybe.
See, that's where I'm like, I don't know. So that's the whole thing about the electric universe. It's that's why the alternative term is plasma cosmology, because it's not just like electricity in the sense that you and I would think of it. It's a slightly it's a plasmatic form of electricity that governs these natural forces of the universe.
You're asking me to go
it's a lot to get into, man. It's this whole own episode, bro. Like we could talk for 2 hours about that shit, but
yeah, we're here to talk about the hollow earth.
I agree with Jeff to an extent. I was waiting for you guys to get done with your spiel because I don't care. I was waiting for I agree with Jeff to an extent of his hiccup when it comes to gravity, because science can't define what gravity is or if that's even the thing that's holding us down. And my agreement with that comes with, looking into this whole hollow earth thing. And people are saying that, well, okay, so there's a sun in the middle, dead smack in the middle of the planet, and maybe that's the thing that's causing the gravity here. Okay, I could buy that, especially if the theory was that the center of the Earth, the core, which there's no way of knowing, because truthfully, you can't get instruments down that deep to find out, because it gets so hot that everything just ceases to function and dies, but the theory was for the longest time that the center of the Earth was just magma. It was just like a ball of magma. And then that would find fissures and cracks in the rocks and eventually just kind of like blow out, and that's where we get volcanoes and things like that. And it's just like, okay, pressure, heat, whatever. And maybe that's true to an extent for like a layer, as you get deeper and deeper and deeper, there's molten rock and stuff. But then another theory surfaced, which was that the center of the Earth is actually a solid iron core, and maybe it's magnetized or whatever, and that's what's causing the gravity. And then a story that I saw in the news recently, which said that science is baffled because the Earth's core has changed direction, right? It's spinning, and suddenly it's now spinning the other way. And what could this mean? And then someone in the comments said, yeah, well, I read that happens like every 7 years. And I was like, okay, so which is it then? Is it magma that's spinning in like water in a bucket that's just, it's all churned up, and then somehow it changes directions, maybe through, bouncing off of surfaces and then the ripples, and then it shifts, right? Think of like that Armageddon movie. No, not Armageddon. What was it? Core. Think of Core with the explosions. That crappy movie from back in the day. Or is it a solid iron core? They have no freaking clue. And if they have no freaking clue on that, then it stands to reason that, just like Jeff was saying, whether it was fudged intentionally or not, it could just be that they have no freaking clue, and they're just basing it off of what makes the most sense, basing instruments off of what makes the most sense, even though it could be dead wrong.
Yeah, they don't have a clue, man. And here's how you know, because the only other body in space that they can do this test on, they did it on. They hit the moon to see what happens. They hit it. I don't remember exactly what they hit it with. They hit it with like some super heavy, dense mass, like warhead, basically. And this thing rang like a bell, they said, right? It's hollow. The moon is hollow. So, and that brings up a whole, I mean, dude, we could go deep. I could go deep on the moon being hollow and it being put here by ancient ancestors of humans from another fucking star system. But, if the moon's hollow, why wouldn't the Earth be hollow?
It's the recording studio, just like the Truman Show.
I don't know how this sent me down this path. So don't expect me to explain this, but random thought, right? Just for a moment. I was just thinking about how astronomers claim that planets their atmospheres can consist of these certain compounds or elements, right? Like
it rains diamonds. Oh,
right. And the way that they do this is by the color of its shine or whatever they're looking at it with. I don't know if they look at it with naked eyes through telescopes or if they're looking through IR or whatever. But like, I don't know, for some reason, I don't know why this came up, but how do they like, there's so many different elements and compounds of, what could be atmosphere. Like our breathable atmosphere is a mixture of what? Carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, a bunch of other little things, right? Do they have like a cheat sheet with all like different colors and what it means?
Like a mood ring?
Do they hold it up? Do they hold it up and they're like,
no,
man, that's sky blue, and then someone comes by and they're like, I don't know, man, looks like robin's egg blue to me. And then the difference between sky blue and robin's egg blue is oxygen and plutonium. Right?
They have to get Sherman Williams paint, and it's
I know plutonium's a metal, but same.
Your line of thinking is stuck in the old paradigm, Jeremy. Remember, they don't take pictures of these exoplanets. They're scanning them with sensors and shit, and they're literally just looking at ones and zeros, and some dildo with a fucking, like you said, a Photoshop fucking degree is creating the color for you to look at. They're not looking at like, oh, it's blue, maybe it's oxygen. No, they're like 101100001. What does that mean? Oh, that means fucking nitrogen. Okay. And then some dickhead fucking paints blue.
Hey, Chuck, is this sky blue or robin's egg blue?
Yeah. Chuck, which one am I using? I don't know. Just paste one from the last one. Okay.
Make them all look the same. Nobody cares.
You just, it's a good question. You're stuck in the old paradigm, bro. There's no.
I don't know how
make that one pink. We got too many blues.
All right. We should get back to the Hollow Earth. I didn't make any argument there whatsoever. I look like a fool. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you, buddy.
No, it's all good, bro.
Love you.
This is what the listeners crave.
This is it. They listen to hear one of us sound completely fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Is it you or is it me?
Or all of us.
Half the people are listening to me like, this guy's fucking out of his mind.
I do. I'm like, wow. I'm going to have this guy at my house in 2 weeks. Oh my gosh. Board up the windows. There's going to be a freaking hurricane.
Dude, hell yeah. Did you ever know that the word volcanoes is spelled vol-canoes? Anyways.
Whoa.
Yeah. So this is the last section. It's a long one though. So buckle in and don't fall asleep. You guys ready? All right. Literature. Again, the first book highlighting the idea of and research into the idea of the Hollow Earth appeared in 1906 by the title of Phantom of the Poles by William Reed. The book quickly became a serious conversation for those with an open mind due to the bibliography of reports by actual Arctic explorers. Although this book did not have some of the more modern explanations of Hollow Earth, it did, however, have a few other viewpoints on some of the critical questions that Hollow Earth theory succeeds in answering. In the years before the book was published, rumor was that there was a dark dust that painted the North Pole's landscape, and people were completely dumbfounded as to how it got there and what it was. Reed answers this question by replacing the Hollow Earth's origin of heat being from the inner sun with volcanic mountains that lay just inside of the lip of the northern entrance. These volcanoes spew hot ash into the air, which travels onto the surface world and rests in the immediate area of the North Pole. This point about the volcanoes, or volcanoes, on the rim of the Hollow Earth would also answer another question in this book about comets consistently hitting the Earth at the poles. He explains that the volcanoes would spew large chunks of Earth as well as the dust, which would be mistaken for comets from outer space. Side note, this book came out 14 years before the first piece of literature detailing the inner sun was published. The idea of the volcanoes at the rim was brought on by previously mentioned Journal of Nobel Peace Prize laureate Dr. Fridtjof Nansen, in which he mentions his wish to turn back. Quote, "Let us go home. What have we here to stay for? Nothing but dust, dust, dust." The book is based around 12 questions or mysteries surrounding the Arctic Pole and how the idea of a hollow Earth can answer all of them. Why is Earth flattened at the poles? Why have the poles never been reached? Why is the sun invincible for so long in the winter near the furthest point north or south? What causes the aurora borealis? Where are the icebergs formed and how? What produces the many tidal waves in the Arctic? Why do meteors fall more frequently near the poles, and from where do they come? What causes the great ice pressure in the Arctic Ocean during still tide and calm weather? Why is there colored snow in the Arctic region? Why is it warmer near the poles than in an area 600 to 1,000 miles south from them? Why is the ice in the Arctic Ocean frequently filled with rock, gravel, and sand? And finally, why does the compass refuse to work near the poles? Many of these questions have been discussed in previous portions of this presentation. We've already gone over the way this book answers them, but what about number 10? Why is it warmer near the poles than in areas 600 to 1,000 miles south from them? This is true, by the way. The average temperature at the fringe of the ice cap is cooler than the average temperature of the pole area year-round. Modern science explains this is due to the wind and breeze coming off of the ocean and uses examples of tropical areas by the ocean being cooler than their inland counterparts. But Hollow Earth theory explains it as it being warmer the further north you go, due to the climate eventually getting warmer the further you go north into the Earth's interior. This book also explains that the aurora borealis is caused by the reflection of the volcanic activity against the backdrop of water and ice particles in the northern atmosphere. And to dive a bit further into his explanation on the dust that was reported by many explorers in the area of the North Pole, Reed explains that the black dust's composition was found to be carbon and iron, which would lend to the belief that this was from volcanic activity. But he also reported that other colors, such as red, green, and yellow, were found to have dyed the snow-covered ice in the area. This, he explains, as being from pollen from plant matter in the inner earth. But my opinion is that this is yet another piece of evidence pointing towards volcanic activity. Sulfur is a common byproduct of volcanoes and can commonly be seen as the colors green and yellow, and in some cases red. But then again, reddish-brown being the color of rust would also be an answer here that would point to possible volcanic activity as well. Too bad I found nothing that reported a bad smell in the area, or this might hold some weight. Another prominent 450-page book on the topic was published in 1920 by Marshall B. Gardner titled A Journey to the Earth's Interior, or Have the Poles Really Been Discovered? Between testimonies of Arctic explorers and Gardner himself, it is said that he spent 20 years researching everything he could about the polar cap before authoring his book. Among many diverse sources listed in his references for the book, there was one source that seemed to be missing, the previously mentioned Phantom of the Poles by William Reed. In this period of history, it is not far-fetched to believe that these two men were completely unaware of each other and their works. Information moved a lot slower and had far less reach in the 1920s than it does today. And I believe it is safe to say that this book found zero direct influence from Reed's book and theories. This is also most likely the reason why we see such drastic changes in the theories behind the Hollow Earth. This is where we see the first printed telling of the sun that warms the inner planet. And the questions that were answered from Reed, that were answered by his volcanic theory, was now being answered with the new central sun theory. This was now the answer to the temperature differences seen at the poles and the aurora borealis. Gardner took it one step further and included what he referred to as quote-unquote astronomical evidence that not only was the Earth hollow, but all planets in our solar system would be as well. Another aspect that Gardner added to the theory was that not only would his inner Earth create a way for flora and fauna to thrive, but it would also most likely mean humans, or a form of human, may also call the inner Earth home. Now, I must mention that Gardner seems to be a really good source for information such as this. The man had over 50 books published, with a majority of them on his personal explorations of the Arctic areas. So if anyone was qualified to publish this info that was being talked about within the circles of the Arctic explorers of the time, Gardner was for sure a great candidate. Gardner is the one that we get a lot of solid dimensional information from in respects to the Hollow Earth and its attributes. He claimed that the crust was 800 miles thick, and the openings at the poles were roughly 1,400 miles in diameter. He explains that mammoths and other quote-unquote ice age critters were not from another time, but rather still active within the shell of the Earth, and that the bodies found throughout history in Arctic ice were unlucky individuals that got swept away by currents in the underground. Gardner also mentions specific species of birds and other animals that migrate north in the winter, and claims that they go to inner lands which are kept warm year-round by the inner sun. Gardner also uses his hollow Earth model to explain why it was believed for so long that the Earth was flat. In his model, you can see that the curvature of the hole at the poles, but you cannot see the other side of the hole, which was over 1,400 miles away. So from the point of view of the explorer, the Earth would look like it would end in a sheer drop, which would have been the guilty party that began the stories of the edge of the world on the flat Earth. On top of all these new answers, Gardner also dove into another question that was on everyone's mind at the time. If the world is hollow and has flora and fauna living within its realm, then wouldn't gravity just suck everything into the sun in the middle? Gardner did a great job at explaining that gravity doesn't come from a geometric location, meaning that it does not come from the center of an object. Rather, it comes from the area of the object which holds the most mass. The crust, being much larger and denser than a small sun in the middle of the planet, would have no issues holding on to whatever needed to survive in the inner crust. And the countering gravitational forces from both the crust and the inner sun would be the main use for the gigantic flora and fauna that are said to be in the inner world. The first book that I read on this subject was a book published originally in 1964, simply titled The Hollow Earth by Dr. Raymond Bernard. Bernard took the theories of Hollow Earth and ran into the realm of government conspiracy while providing a fantastic summary of his predecessor's books. According to Bernard, the government went to great lengths to keep any book with real scientific research on the theory of Hollow Earth off of the shelves in order to keep the claim of all the new land to the U.S. government. He claimed that if the government had failed to do so, the land would most certainly become more intriguing to adversaries. But the most interesting claim that Bernard made throughout his book was the consistent points and evidence that he provided regarding the truth about flying saucers.
Ooh.
Yeah. All right, guys. So that's it. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, Jake.
I went first last time.
It's your turn.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know.
You know what's interesting is the idea that like these like the mammoth carcasses were washed up to these parts in the northern hemisphere where they find like these tens of thousands of instantly killed and frozen mammoths,
Yeah.
Makes me think of like the whole Younger Dryas event, and because the Younger Dryas period definitely happened, right? We know that. What caused it is up for debate. Was it a comet impact, which is kind of like where I did that episode on? Maybe it was like a hollow earth burp or something, like an eruption, but not like a volcanic eruption, like a hollow earth eruption, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to unpack from this, right? Let's see. Like you had said, the Ice Age animals, right? So I thought it was in this section. Apparently not. Apparently it's in a different one. But we eventually talk a little bit more about the ice wall, right? And how it works with hollow earth theory and not just flat earth theory. So basically the gist is, and it's just going to be reiterated in one of the next topics, but I'll dive into it real quick, is that ice, snow, ice, glaciers. Well, we'll talk about glaciers, right? Glaciers are a vast majority freshwater. They're large ice cubes on top of salt water. How does that happen? Well, freshwater freezes faster than salt, right? Or salt water.
Mm-hmm.
So the freshwater the freshwater parts of a saltwater mixture freezes and pushes the salt out of the ice block. And that's how you get freshwater icebergs or ice shelves, if you will. So salt water can be much, much colder before it starts to freeze. So if you have freshwater rivers or freshwater oceans from the inner earth flowing towards the outer earth into the very ice cold waters that are cold enough to make saltwater slush, then you would get almost instantaneous freezing. And that's basically how the animals, the prehistoric animals such as the mammoth and others, right, become frozen and so well preserved, because in order to be so well preserved, like literally the only way to be so well preserved is flash freezing, right? So the animal dies, falls into the water, gets swept away out the northern or southern Symes hole, and hits that freezing cold water of the salt water here on the exterior of the planet, and instantly freezes. And that's also how the ice wall is built, because you get that constant clash of fresh water hitting salt water, which would initially create an ice wall, right? It'd start off thin at first, but as you get more fresh water hitting the freshwater side of that ice wall, you would get more, it would become bigger and bigger and wider and longer and taller and all kinds of shit, right? And I honestly think I did a better job explaining it this time than I will later on, but that's what they mean by mammoths, saber-teeths, cave bears, all the fun stuff, how they become so well preserved.
And it's not like debated either. There is like an ocean under the crust, right? Is what they were calling it. I remember. So 400 miles under the crust, apparently there's oceans worth of water down there in various forms. Some of it like compressed into the rock, some of it in actual like reservoirs of probably ocean sized reservoirs and caverns or whatever, So
yeah.
So even if the earth isn't hollow, that water is still doing the thing that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
And there's been migrations. I was trying to find this earlier. I thought it was raised, but maybe it wasn't raised. But there was like a few years, this might have been like 5-6 years ago now. There was like a migration of something, thought it was raised, that they found. And they were like, we've never seen this species of this thing before. What the fuck?
Oh, yeah. They came from the inner earth. It was raised. It was a form of ray. Yes.
Right. Okay. So that's what it was. And then they were finding that they were coming from these like under crust or under ocean, underground caverns, if you will, ocean size that these
Yeah.
things just migrated out of every however 70 years or whatever the fucking number was, you know.
Well, so Jake, I can't remember what episode it was, maybe Peppy, but I had brought up the idea that all eels come from one singular place. Remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, from the Bermuda Triangle.
Right. One of the theories that I did not mention with that, because I didn't want to dive too far into something and go too far off topic on that subject, was that one of the theories is that the eels come from a cavity in the inner earth.
Right.
And it's a place where they specifically spawn, how they adapted to be eels in that specific area. So there's a modern, you know, I would say a much larger scale explanation of what you were just talking about there, Jeff. Where the ray example is specific to one species. Literally, all eels in North America, they're all descendant of whatever is found in the Bermuda Triangle.
Inner Earth eels.
Yeah. So
Brutal.
yeah, go ahead and fact check that one, listeners. It's true. It's crazy. It's crazy true.
There's a few other things you listed off there that I can't remember now that was interesting to me.
Yeah, that's why you have to have a notepad guy.
I just listen. I don't write. I can't read, so how am I going to write?
I can write, but I just can't read it afterwards.
Yeah, I probably should have broke that section up into smaller pieces so that we could have digested that a little easier. But when I wrote this, I didn't write it for a conversation. You know, I wrote this for a solo doc, so it kind of wrote in the wrong format. So maybe I'll take a look at 2, 3, and 4 before we record them and kind of chop them up a little bit, put them in smaller, digestible portions.
Right on. I also do like the concept of there being advanced civilizations living under the ground, in the earth, whatever, right?
Oh, man.
There's multiple ancient peoples, right, who have stories about this. And the one I can think of off the top of my head, I think, is the Hopi tribe, right, where they talk about the ant people coming from out of the ground and saving them from the cataclysm that we now know as the Younger Dryas, and then letting them out after the event, which probably took 1,000 years, and was like, here you go, like, you're good now. So what is that, right? Did these people just make that up, or
crab people? Crab,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Whenever we get to final thoughts, I'll shoot it out there. But I got some thoughts on that, man.
Well, we definitely I believe it's in the last episode in the life segment, we will talk about civilizations, and we'll talk about how a lot of ancient civilizations here on the surface had stories and were very deep believers in Hollow Earth, and that they all had their own names for it. And I'm not going to just list everything off, but we go into specific accounts too. I don't think I talked about the ant people or the crab people. But
what about Man Bear Pig? You talk about him?
Maybe. I'm not going to say yes or no, but I really don't have too many final thoughts myself here. I think, really we did a good job at just kind of talking about it as we go. I will say, however, that after doing all the research for Hollow Earth and listening to the episodes and reading more and more about it, I don't know. I think that there's a really good chance that there is something, that there is an aspect to the Hollow Earth that is real. Whether it's a gigantic cavern below our feet, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not a big fan of the concentric sphere theory. I think that the tradition or the modern view of Hollow Earth with the floating sun makes a lot of sense. Makes fringe scientific sense. Of course, you have to cut some pieces to make them fit, but for the most part, I mean, the theoretical science, the really elementary theoretical science makes sense. And I'm not a physicist and I'm not a scientist, but I'm a guy who reads a lot of books. That makes me like the most professional person ever.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. I'm like the source on this information. But yeah, final thoughts on this episode is that my final thoughts at the end of the whole thing will basically be me saying I really love the concept of Hollow Earth. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's honestly artistic. You know, I know it's a little weird, but I really do like the whole Hollow Earth thing. I can't wait to get some ink and add it to my arm. Definitely gonna happen. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I got for final thoughts.
I don't think I'm smart enough to make a a decision, and this is gonna piss people off, but I am who I am. I just don't care. If I have to get up, if I find out tomorrow that the Earth is hollow or flat or whatever, and I still have to go to work to pay my bills, I mean, it'd be cool. It'd be really, really cool, but it's not something I'm going to dedicate a tremendous amount of time to. Now, I will say that you, having listened to at least 3 episodes out of the 4, you do a very good job at your report and explaining the whole thing, and the listeners will get to enjoy that too. And I guess in some ways it kind of makes sense, and it would be cool, and it would kind of, I don't know, tantalize that desire I have that we should really be spending all of our resources on getting into the oceans and getting into everything that this world has before we go and explore the infinity that's space, or not, depending on, what you believe. But all right, space. What is it? Who knows? But it's just an incredible waste of money when the oceans aren't fully explored. Antarctica, the Arctic isn't explored fully, things like that. It's just, I want to know more so of what's here on this planet before I truly care about what's on other planets, which in my mind is just a bunch of dirt and rocks and gases. So, I mean, and what is dirt but ground up rocks? So, it's just like, but at the same token, if I still have to go to work and still have to pay my bills and still have to spend a reasonable amount of money on gas, well, then really what does it matter? Jeff's going to say it matters. Everything matters. It matters to the extent of everything.
Be very excited to wake up tomorrow morning and find out that the Earth is either flat or hollow. I think it would be
how fucking depressed.
You'd never be able to go there.
How depressed are you, bro? Jesus Christ, man.
You'd never be able to go there. It would get locked down for scientific research. You'd never be able to explore because, oh my gosh, like I went to this Crystal Caves place here in town, or at least outside of town, here in Wisconsin, and you can't even touch the walls. They're like, keep your hands to yourself, hands in your pockets. Don't get your greasy little fingers all over the stalactites and the stalagmites, because once you touch them, the oils from your fingers permanently stops the growth of them forever, right? And so you'd never be able to go there. You'd never be able to see it. You wouldn't be able to trust the photos that come from it, because we can't even trust the photos that are coming from space. So what does it matter?
Photos coming from like next door, dude.
True.
I think you're right, obviously, to some extent, right? So basically, I'll just put it like this, right? I'll leave, like, my final thoughts is more of like what I hope is the truth, right? Because I already said at the beginning, I think it's like 20% true, right? I think 20% of the Earth is probably hollow. It's probably more of like a honeycomb structure. It's probably giant caverns. There might even be, advanced peoples living in some of these giant caverns that could be the size of states or countries down there, right? I think that's totally plausible. But what I hope is the truth, right, is I hope that human beings are from another planet and another star system, and that we built this Earth and sent it here billions of years ago terraform whatever we had to do, sent the moon behind it to terraform it when it got here, and that this hollow structure that's inside of the Earth it's like the Death Star, man. It's like it was built this way. I hope that's the case. I hope somebody writes a book or a movie on that, because that would be sick. But I think in reality, it's probably just a bunch of giant fucking caves down there.
Pretty sure there's tons of books on this.
Yeah.
Tons. Yeah.
Is there a good movie though? Is there like
I don't know. I don't know about movies.
Core.
Come on, somebody
Core
listens to the show. Somebody that listens to the show is a fucking film producer, right? One of you guys, dude, hook me up, man. Give me like a good movie about this, right?
The Descent.
What?
Is that what that's about?
No.
It's about creatures in the caves.
But it's not.
No. I'm talking about like ancient humans from Zeta Reticuli sending Earth to orbit Sol, because that's the last hope for humanity.
The Zeta Reticulans are greys, my sir.
Are they? Or are they us from the future, or another?
According to Betty and Barney Hill, that is the truth.
Well, yes. I'm not saying that they're not, but I'm saying is the Greys not humans. We don't know this, right?
So that's a crazy And if
they sent us here that long ago, right, and it took that long for us to get here, 1 billion, 10 billion years, I don't know, however long it's been, they've evolved to the gray state, and now they're here checking us out. Like, yo, what happened to like our fucking Earth that we sent off? Let's go check it out.
Gosh. I have a conversation I overheard at work. I have to talk to you about it offline because it'll get us in trouble. But it was like, oh my gosh.
Well, so I've heard many theories about the Greys, and I know we're getting way off the topic of Hollow Earth here, but fuck it. And Jake, I know you're not going to agree with any of this, like
anything that either of you two say most of the time. I'm here for it.
There are so many theories about the Greys, and it comes from before us and after us. Is majority of them, right? They are there's theories that they were us, right? That we are the evolved form of the Grey, or a hybrid between a Grey and earthbound ape. I mean, if you take a gray alien and breed it with a gorilla or a chimp, right? And go chimp, the offspring might be something that looks like a human being. Then there's the theories on the other side of things that they are us from the future, that they are what we evolve into or we adapt into. We lose all form of individuality and we just become a palette of gray, right? The most boring possible looking things that we could possibly ever think of. And then, everything in between is, they're from other planets, Zeta Reticuli or Zeta Reticulans, the system, or they're from another dimension, or even the Hollow Earth. And the Hollow Earth, now that just to kind of spin that in here, the Hollow Earth theory on the Greys, I think, makes a lot of sense. I think it makes a lot of sense. When you think of cave-bound creatures,
But they don't have eyes.
They have... So, yeah, like the naked mole rat, right? Doesn't have eyes. But there are some cave-dwelling animals that do. Now, I'm not a biologist. I'm not a caveologist either. Whatever they are, geologists or spelunkologist.
Spelunkologists.
So I don't claim to know at all, but I don't know. I think I just feel like a gray alien makes sense for something that you would run into in like the deepest, darkest cave systems in the world. Like if I'm down there, right, and I'm down there with a group of people, and I just
like The Descent. Yeah.
Do you know about Phil Schneider?
Who?
Phil Schneider.
Phil Schneider?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
You don't know about Phil Schneider? Phil Schneider was apparently a contractor that was building deep underground military facilities back in like the 70s and the 80s.
Dumbs?
And yeah. And his story, he's got a fucking missing hand all fucked up, and his story was basically that like during the process of excavating underground for one of these dumbs, they like broke through into this cavern and basically had a shootout with Greys, like special forces and Greys or whatever. Like they went at it, and Schneider lost his hand. He was like on the, you know, in the front, like the guys who broke through into that cavern, so he got fucked up.
Dude, let's cover that. Do that.
It's a cool story. It's a good
Bring
story.
that on for the first episode in September. Fuck it. Let's do that.
You like
What's
that?
his name? Will Schneider?
Phil Schneider.
Can
Phil
you text
Schneider.
me? Can you text me that? I'm gonna find a book. There's
My
gotta
phone
be
is
a
my
book.
camera, but yeah.
Yeah, when we're done, text me that.
This is why you have a notepad, bro.
Bro, I do have a notepad.
Zing.
You said who? Who was it? Phil?
Phil. Yep. Phil.
Schneider.
Like Philip Schneider.
How do you spell Schneider?
I don't fucking know, dude. Sound it out. Schneider.
SCHNEIDER.
Boom.
Did you already find it, Jake?
I'm looking it up.
Phil
I just know how to spell Schneider.
Right. But I don't know. I just feel like, you know, maybe it's Hollywood in my mind, but if I'm down there and I run into a Grey, I'm not completely surprised. I mean, I'm scared out of my fucking mind. You know, I heard they like to stick things up butts, but you know, I'm not.
You know, that's another one of my favorite theories, man. And you know, this goes along with the space is fake thing for me, is that, you know, all of what they tell us about space is actually what's happening under our feet. You know, that the ancients would look at the lights in the skies and name them Mars and Jupiter and whatnot. And then as we started figuring out, like, hey, we actually can't get up there, it's not what we thought it was for thousands of years, they started naming their dumb facilities Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and so on and so forth, so that they could get away with their little karmic wheel and tell us, like, hey, we're actually going to fucking Mars. And they are. It's just not the planet Mars. It's the fucking dumb facility Mars.
I dropped a link for an article inside the chat
Good.
on Phil Schneider.
Send that link.
Well, I sent it inside the chat for the episode.
Oh, I want. Oh yeah, there it is.
And that's why
yeah.
that's why the astronauts practice in water. It's because they're not going out in space. They're going into the hollow earth.
Not a space agency. NASA.
All right. Well, this episode is definitely lingering. This is a 2-hour long episode. It's great.
Nice.
Everything's fine. Everything's
Everything's
But
fine. It's past my
somebody's at the end.
bedtime, though.
Somebody's at the end of this right now, and they're like, "What the fuck are these guys talking about? These guys are stupid. I hate this show." I know that the return to the old format might have been a little rocky. You know, we're not used to this format anymore. But
Hell no, dude. This was good.
I was gonna say it was a hell of a lot more fun than recording a solo documentary. That is 100% facts. I had a good time, very good time, and but it'll only get better from here until it doesn't, and then it'll get worse. But then it'll get better from there until it doesn't.
Oh, shut up.
I'm trying to get this right at 2 hours. Sorry, guys. All right.
This has been another episode of The Infinite Rabbit Hole. Thank you so much for joining us.
Anything else, guys? Anything?
Nope.
No.
Past my bedtime.
No. All right. Well, we'll see you next week, everybody, for part 2 of our coverage on the Hollow Earth. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Adios.
Dang, Jeff speaks French.
I would like to thank you once again for tuning in to the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. Please make sure to give us a follow and one of those beautiful 5-star ratings on your podcast player of choice. If you would like to join the conversation and stay up to date on all things Infinite Rabbit Hole, head on over to Facebook and search for the Infinite Rabbit Hole Facebook group. You'll know it's us when you see the logo. If you would like to help contribute to the cause, there are a few ways to do so. First, head on over to anchor.fm/Infinite Rabbit Hole and click on the subscribe button, where for $5 a month you'll get access to all our old episodes that will never see the free spotlight ever again. It's horrible stuff, but if you're into that kind of thing, then go check it out. Second, head on over to infiniterabbithole.com and click on the IRH merch shop tab and grab yourself a sweet t-shirt, sticker, or whatever else you see that you wouldn't mind owning. Until next time, travelers, I'm Jeremy, and I'll see you at the next fork in the path of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. Bye.